Hello, and welcome to the first day of the Diet Culture Funhouse Challenge. I'm Tracy here at Nourishing Body and Soul, and I'm glad you're here with me today. So, why a funhouse? I had a client one time say, "But I think the funhouse is fun. I don't like that." And I said, "Well, here's the deal: things in the funhouse aren't real." And so, these mirrors that we're talking about that will relate to how diet culture has affected us are a reflection that seems to be reality because it's right in front of our eyes is what we're seeing, but it's not real. And so we're here to pull back the curtain, so to speak, on the things that can seem fun, can seem normal, can seem natural, but in reality, it's just not truth. So let's dive in. First of all, we'll kind of go over a little what we're going to be talking about. We've got 4 days here, and however long we need each day, no more than an hour. And we'll cover the premises that we're going to smash 4 of these Diet Culture Funhouse mirrors while we're here together this week. Each day will end with the challenge. Also, I have some special offers for you as we go through the week, these 4 days, not a whole week, but so stay tuned for that. And all week long, we'll be offering a free 15-minute call. I'll show my Calendly address for that. So feel free to book one of those. It's no cost to you. And I'm happy to chat with you about any questions that you have about anything that we're talking about, or thoughts that you have, or concerns you have, whatever. I'm happy to chat with you. And you can book a time on that link at any time during this challenge or after. So day 1, we're talking about appearance. Day 2, we'll be talking about weight and weight loss. Day 3, we'll be talking about food and eating. And day 4, we're talking about health and fitness and how diet culture has impacted these things that we think are very natural and important things, which they are, but let's look at some of the views. So I'm going to take a second and share my screen here with you. Got a few slides for you. There we go. So just what I was just talking about, these distorted mirrors of diet culture, appearance, weight, weight loss, food and eating, health and fitness. So today we are starting off with appearance. So I want you to take a look at this picture, because it's just a stock photo. When I was looking at it, we're looking for it, I typed in diversity. So if you look at this, we're all about inclusivity and celebrating the differences these days. And you have some variation in height, some variation in race, and even a little variation in age. But you'll notice in this inclusivity and diversity picture, they're all basically the same body size. And that's very telling. It is very common, it is usual in our culture that we live in, that there's a very accepted body size, spoken or unspoken. And there's been a lot more spoken about it lately, but it is still, when it comes down to it, when you watch TV, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here for a second. When you watch TV, when you watch movies, when you are looking at photos, when you're on Instagram or Facebook or the social medias, many of these are presenting the same basic body type. And that is, they may not be pointing out that, but it's just what we see. It's the pool that we're swimming in, so to speak. And when we're in that pool, you know how it is, you get adjusted to that water temperature and you don't even realize that, we don't even think about that. And that's what we're here to do these few days together, is just think about it, to take a look at what is this pool that we're swimming in, and is it where we want to be, and what can we do about it if it's not? So there's a very narrow definition of what is acceptable, and that's broadening some, and that's really good news. And we'll talk about the body positivity movement in just a minute, but in the meantime, just being very aware that even with all the talk of more diversity, let's look at what the reality is. Notice when you're watching TV, when you're watching movies, notice the sizes of the people that are acceptable. And people in different body sizes or shapes often there's specific comment made about that. And that points it out. And so that is why can people not just be in that body and be whatever in that role? So I know this is not news to you that is, but just to start noticing that a little more, to be really aware of, even with, like I said, all the current talk that there's more inclusivity and more accepting of being more accepting of diversity, that, but what's the reality that we live in still? And what can we do about that? So what are the results of swimming in this pool that we're swimming in? Let me share my screen with you again here. Hold on one second. There it is. And let's look at the results that come from this. So because we are all swimming in this pool together, it causes us to be overly focused on our appearance. And it's no wonder, with all the focus on the appearance, that we find ourselves overly concerned about ours. Just a story that it just still makes me sad to this day. There was a lady that it was at church, and I was head of the women's organization. And this one woman had just really been on my mind at that point in time. And I really felt like she needed to visit. And I didn't know why, I didn't know what was going on in her life. So I went to her house, and her son answered the door. And he said, "Oh, hold on a minute." So he went back to get his mom, and he came back and he said, "Oh, she can't come to the door right now. She doesn't have her makeup or her hair on or her hair done." And I thought, "Oh, okay." And I know that's a very important, there's nothing wrong with wanting your makeup and your hair done, but in this situation, she was overly concerned about her appearance to the point that it kept her from a connection. I was there to serve her, to love her, and because she was needed to, have her makeup on and her hair done, she wasn't ready to receive that. And like I said, there's nothing wrong with wanting our hair and makeup done. That's a fine thing. But just looking at it, what is it? Does that sometimes get in our way of connecting with other people, or from experiencing things? Maybe you've had the experience where you've been not want to go out because you didn't want to, you didn't look the way that you wanted to look to go out. And then it also affects us because if we strive to fit into that narrow, acceptable box of what we should look like, and we don't fit into that, and we try to, then we get frustrated and we can feel guilty and we can feel shameful because we can't successfully make ourselves look like that. And instead of questioning the standards, we question ourselves and we blame ourselves. It's my fault that I can't stay on that diet. It's my fault that I'm not committed enough to get up and do, make sure that I look this way before I leave the house. It's my fault this. And we blame ourselves, and we feel frustrated from trying to so hard sometimes to just, try this diet and this exercise routine and that exercise routine to try to get ourselves into that narrow box, and it doesn't work, and we blame ourselves. And then with that frustration and shame come body image and self-image and self-respect being lowered. It's no surprise that when we feel we don't measure up to the accepted norms, our own body image, self-esteem, and self-respect can take a hit. Now, in just a second, sorry, that's not what I meant to do. In just a second, we're going to get into a couple of scriptures that talk about this, but think about how God wants you to feel about yourself. He loves you. You're his daughter, and he loves you. And he wants you to respect yourself. He respects you. He wants you to have good self-esteem. He wants you to feel that worthiness that you are innately born with, and that nothing you can do will change. Because you're his daughter, you have an innate worthiness, an innate worth that's there. And one of the really insidious impacts of diet culture and these faux standards, these false standards that we're expected to conform to, is that it can eat away at that sense of self-worth, that sense of value. if we're not meeting up. And maybe you've had the experience of thinking, when I get to that size, when I get to that weight, when I can lift this many pounds, then I'll feel good. Then I'll feel okay. And then either you don't get there, and so you blame yourself again, or you do get there and you realize that that wasn't the answer. It's because your worth is not wrapped up in your appearance. And yet that's what we're taught, is that our worth is connected to our appearance. Completely false. Another one of the results of swimming in this pool that we're swimming in is that there's a lot of wasted time and wasted money being spent by chasing the size and shape that our body was never intended to be. Let's not kid ourselves. This is a multi-billion-dollar industry. There are lots of people who are making a lot of money off of keeping us unhappy with how we look, dissatisfied in our bodies. So that we're not playing on a level playing field here. There are a lot of people spending a lot of money to keep us feeling this way so that we'll keep buying their products and doing their programs and all that kind of thing. So we just need to be aware of what we're up against here. So what's the reality? So that's the false situation that we're in, but what's the reality of the situation? Now let's look at some scriptures. We're going to turn to 1 Samuel 16, verse 7. That's in the Old Testament. If you remember, the prophet Samuel was tasked with selecting a new king when Saul had fallen from grace. And he is sent to Jesse. And he said, among his sons, you'll find the king. So Samuel goes and he sees Jesse's first son, Eliab, and he said, surely the Lord's anointed is before me. But this was God's response. What God said was, said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, nor on the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord looketh on the heart. The Lord seeth a man, for the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. So what are we looking at? The Lord looks on our heart. Are we focused more where real joy can be found and real value in recognizing our self-worth on our heart? Or are we focused more on our outward appearance? Because that's not what God's focused on. Let's look at another scripture. We're going to go to, this time, Ecclesiastes, also in the Old Testament, chapter 3, verse 11. And there he says, he hath made everything beautiful in its time. It doesn't say most everything. It doesn't just say his nature and the world he created. It says everything. He created us beautifully. He created you beautifully. And that's how he sees you. He's not going to, I'm 100% sure, when we get to see him again, there's not going to be a scale there that we have to stand on. There's not going to be anybody checking the clothing sizes. There's not going to be anybody looking at the brand of the clothing that we're wearing at that moment in time. He's not going to be asking us what our skincare routine was. He's going to look on our hearts. He hath created us beautifully, and that's how he sees us. The reality is that less than 5% of people have the quote unquote ideal body size. So I included here a picture of Elshante Snell. We get this idea in our head about what we should look like when we're fit, when we're taking good care of ourselves. And we have this very narrow idea of that. Well, Elshante Snell, if you just saw her walking down the street in regular clothes, you would not peg her as an athlete, most likely, because of how she looks. But she is a marathon and an ultra marathon runner. You would not know that typically. Look at her. When we think of ultra marathon runners, we think of very slim, very small, very little body weight or body fat. there's a certain picture that comes to our mind that is most likely not Shantae. And so I bring this up to point out that we just don't know. We can't judge anybody else or ourselves by that appearance. And so, but many people take drastic measures to achieve and maintain an ideal look. There, again, billions of dollars are spent. There are people who are spending a lot of money on plastic surgery, on weight loss surgeries, on lots of very expensive makeup and beauty routines. And again, if that's your thing, just look at why. Why? Is it because you love that it's a form of self-care, or is it literally a face that you feel like you have to put on to be presentable and to be accepted? Another reality is that the ideal is constantly changing. Um, this, I mean, it's not really funny, but it kind of is funny. If you look at, we think, oh, well, this is just natural. It's human nature to be attracted to beauty. And that's true. But the thing is that the beauty standard keeps changing. If you look back at like the paintings of Rubens, where the women were very round, that was very beautiful back then. There were times when it was considered a sign of status to be plump because it meant that you had plenty of food available to you, or to be very fair skinned because it meant that you didn't have to toil out in the sun for your sustenance. Being thinner and tanner, which in our society often are things that are very desirable looks. At one time, those things were considered a sign of being a peasant. It was not something that was desirable. We can go through decade by decade by decade, what was considered beautiful, what was considered the ideal way to look, and it changes. And so the reality is that if that's what we're after, we're chasing a constantly changing target. It's a moving target, and it's not necessarily a target that is attainable for us with the way that our body is meant to be. What is another reality of this? Here we go. Let me share that screen again. So body positivity and body neutrality. So let's talk about this for just a minute. This body positivity is a growing movement, and it's a step in the right direction. But maybe you've tried to embrace that and you felt that you just can't love everything about your body every moment of every day. And that's okay. We're not meant to. Body positivity is a step in the right direction, but it's still very body centric. It's still focused on how our body looks. And it's, accepting everything about us. And there's something to be said for acceptance, and that's a good thing. But in one of my favorite books on this is More Than a Body by Lindsay and Lexi Kite. Oh my gosh, you want to change your perspective about this? This is the book for you. One of the things that they talk about is body neutrality. And hopefully you don't have to go too far back to remember, but at least back when you were a kid, do you remember that feeling of just going out to play? Just putting clothes on in the morning and heading out to school? We weren't thinking about what our bodies looked like as we did it. We weren't thinking when we sat down next to our friend on the playground, oh my goodness, are my thighs spreading too much when I'm sitting like this? And those are thoughts that we have now. They call that being disembodied, or objectifying ourselves. We hear a lot about objectifying, women, or objectifying men, whatever, objectifying somebody as looking at them as a body, hence the title, More Than a Body. But when we do that to ourselves, we kind of live in this split thing. We're not just in our bodies experiencing our lives. We're viewing ourselves doing this activity and thinking about what we look like as we do it and judging that. And body neutrality that they talk about, which to me is the goal, is that we're just living in our bodies. It's not like we have complete disregard for what we look like. We take care of ourselves. We have self-respect, and we do what we feel like we need to take care of ourselves and our bodies. But we also are willing to just be in our body and to nurture it in ways of, helping it function the best that we can and that type of thing. But just letting our bodies be, letting them just do their job. One of their phrases that use all the time is that our body is an instrument, not an ornament. To be an instrument, to be used by us, to be lived in, to serve a function. And so are we concerned about the function of our body, or are we concerned about the appearance of our body? It's not an ornament just to be looked at. So culturally, we're much more focused on the ornamental than on the function. And to have that body neutrality. So if you've dealt with body positivity, you think, I can't even do that. What is wrong with me? It's not you. It's just that it's still very body centric. Body neutrality is like, just care for your body, love it, nurture it, but let it be, just let it do its job. And that is a really powerful place to live. So we've talked about the culture we live in. We've talked about the results of living in that culture. We've talked about what the reality is. So now what's the possibility? Where can we go from here? Because we're not going to change the culture we live in overnight. That's a big ship that needs to be steered. So what do we do while we're still living in this culture? We aim for that body neutrality. That's a possibility. It's possible to live with that neutrality. It's possible to be deeply content with your body, regardless of how it looks, to appreciate it for what it is, what its job is, what it can do, what it does for you. Literally, our body is the only thing that's with us from the very second we're born until the second we die. We don't have any other relationships in our life that last that long. Not a one. So our bodies are a pretty important relationship to have peace with. We can have that contentment. We can have a realistic perspective and not just these phony diet culture perspectives that keep us small, that keep us focused on things that are not of eternal importance, that don't honor our purpose as daughters of God. We can have freedom from self-judgment and guilt and shame when it comes to our bodies. If that's something you've struggled with, take just a minute and imagine what it could feel like to be free from that self-judgment and that guilt and that shame. Can you even imagine that? I hope you can. With that comes an increase in our self-esteem and our self-respect and an understanding of our true self-worth, which then, of course, gives us a healthy body image. Maybe that's something that it's been a very long time since you've felt, but it's a possibility. So we have all of these things, all of these tools that we can use, these possibilities we can hope for. So what's one small step that we can take today? Because this is a challenge. And so each day there will be a little challenge for you to do, for you to take to make a step in this direction. So for today, our challenge is to ask yourself, where did I learn to be dissatisfied with my body? Was it from my family? I've had clients whose mothers or fathers have made comments about their bodies from a very young age that taught them that their body wasn't acceptable the way that it was. I've had other clients who it was the media or the culture. For myself personally, I had grown up and I was living in what I didn't realize, but it was just body neutrality, basically. Made it all the way to college. And now when I first went to college when I was 17 years old, I was a theater major. So I was living off campus. My classes were at the north end of campus and I lived off the south end of campus. And so I was walking all over creation. I was very active just from walking to my classes. Then also being a theater major, I was taking dance classes. So I was dancing for at least a couple of hours a day. When I was in shows, I was very active in the movement of the show, doing the rehearsals and doing the performances, I was very active. And when I was, it was 18, maybe 19 years old, I remember very clearly seeing, I don't know what magazine it was, but I saw a magazine about how much a woman should weigh. It even had a chart. And this chart said that, if you're this height, you should weigh this much. If you're this height, you should weigh this much. And when I looked at that, for my height, according to that chart, I was 5 pounds overweight. And I thought, oh no, that was the first time I ever viewed my body as a problem to be solved. Now, looking back now, I think, why did I not question that? It didn't question those standards, that information. I questioned myself. And I took that on myself. And then, so even though with all of the activity I was doing and how active I was and how strong I was, I thought, oh my goodness, I need to lose this 5 pounds. I need to start exercising more. I was already active for hours a day. But so I took up running and because that seemed to be what people were doing to maintain or to lose weight. So I took up running. Now, I didn't like to run. I never have. And I've tried many times to take up running. It's not my jam. But I took it up then because that's what people were doing to lose weight. And I had 5 pounds I had to lose. What I didn't realize that when I took up running, where I was running to was straight into this diet culture funhouse. It really warped my perspective. That magazine, that with that chart, it is so, to say somebody at this height should be this way is so clueless about how human bodies actually work and how they're designed. And yet I didn't question that at all. How many things in our lives have we heard and not questioned that simply are not accurate? They're not true. How many things? Let's look at those things and let go of them. Maybe where you learned to be dissatisfied with your body was from others around you. Maybe you have friends that very much bond over dieting. Maybe you had high school girlfriends that were very concerned. And this was like the activity that everybody did was talked about how they looked and how they wanted to look and what they were going to do to achieve that. It's very much of a cultural bonding thing, this. But somewhere you did not come to this earth being dissatisfied with your body. You learned that somewhere. So try seeing yourself through God's eyes. What does he see when he looks at you? Remember, he is your loving parent. How does he see you? If you're a parent yourself, think about your very most loving moments with your children and how do you see them? Now, consider that Heavenly Father's love is perfect and try to imagine how he sees you. Tangible thing to do is to make a physical list of 5 or more ways that he sees you. And if you can't come up with 5, at least 5, then go to Calendly, CALENDLY.com/TLASTLE and book a free 15-minute call with me. This is something that I can tell you, you are loved. I can help you see how God sees you if that's not something you can see right now. If you have any questions or comments about anything we've talked about today, then book a call. I'm happy to chat. And until tomorrow, be thinking about how God sees you and let that really sink in. See you tomorrow and bring a friend.